I wanted to take you back, all of you back in time, to a Shabbat service at Temple Beth Ami on June 24th of this year. On that evening, I learned something which contradicted everything that I had previously understood to be true about the Jews who fled Egypt with Moses. I always thought that the reason God did not allow us into Israel was because God didn't want former slaves who had a slave mentality into the land of freedom. So God made us wander around the wilderness for 40 years. But I learned from Rabbi Blazer that this was not exactly true. First, our ancestors weren't wandering around the wilderness aimlessly. It wasn't like they said, "We're lost, we don't have GPS," whatever that is. No, our ancestors knew exactly where they were and where they were going. Ancient people could do something most of us cannot do today, except maybe Don Kogan. Our ancestors could navigate by the stars. Better yet, they could see the stars because there was no light pollution. But I digress. God made the former slaves of Pharaoh remain in the wilderness for 40 years until almost everyone who had been a slave had died, and a new generation who did not know slavery came to be. We know that story. But why? It wasn't because the former slaves had recurring flings with idolatry, such as the golden calf. It wasn't because they defied or even rejected God. It wasn't just because they had a slave mentality. We learned from Rabbi Blazer that God refused the former slaves' entry into Israel because they did not believe in themselves. They did not believe in themselves. They were too frightened to enter the land of Israel because they thought giants who would destroy them lived there. Now, God could look beyond their flings with idolatry and even rejection, but the one thing God could not accept was the Jewish people not believing in themselves. So as we end the year and look ahead to a new year, I think we need to ask ourselves, do we believe in ourselves? Do we believe in ourselves as a Reformed Jewish community that has come together at Temple Beth Ami? Now, that Israel believes in itself goes without saying. But, and I just learned this, did you know that Israel even has a public venture capital fund that invests in future technology? The people who work at that fund see themselves as investors and risk takers. And the example of Israel shows that to believe in yourself, you must be strong in the present and invest in the future. There's nothing that requires us to have a Reformed synagogue in Santa Clarita. But without a vibrant synagogue, I submit that we lose relevance in our community. Last Friday, one of the candidates for our state assembly spoke at Temple Beth Ami. The other candidate will be speaking to us on Friday, October 14th. Yes, they want our votes, but they also want to hear what we have to say. That cannot be duplicated without a vibrant synagogue. Consider last night's apology by our district congressman in person at Temple Beth Ami. That was not just important because it was the right thing to do. It was important because it means we are relevant in this community. But will that always be true? Ask yourself this: if your child or grandchild, if their school teacher scheduled the test on Yom Kippur, what influence would you be able to exert by yourself to object? Kelly and I were in Santa Fe, New Mexico last month, and we read a story in the local newspaper there about the Jewish community of Las Vegas, New Mexico. During what we would call the days of the Old West, that community was vibrant and influential. It was the biggest west of the Mississippi. But then over time, it essentially disappeared. Today, Jews are trying to make a comeback in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and the town mayor, who isn't Jewish, is hopeful because he knows how positive this will be for his town. But there is no synagogue because there isn't enough money to buy a church building that is for sale. What happens next? I don't know. But I hope that a future generation does not read about the former Reformed synagogue in Santa Clarita, which one day disappeared. Are we so confident that could never happen? Sadly, as Jews, we can never be complacent. Unless you've been completely off the grid, you are well aware of the awful rise of anti-Semitism and hate in our country and abroad. Remember that movie Poltergeist 2, where the little girl is watching TV and the screen goes fuzzy and she says, "They're back." Well, they never left. Consider the recent election of Italy's new prime minister, who said, "We will never be slaves at the mercy of financial speculators." Benito Mussolini used the very same language to refer to Jews, who he said needed to be controlled. Some American politicians are elated at the new Italian prime minister's election. If we brush aside her words as meaningless rhetoric, we do that at our own peril. In 2020 and 2021, there were Americans who compared the wearing of pandemic masks to Nazis forcing Jews to wear yellow stars of David. The murder of 6 million Jews was trivialized and reduced to a meme. Sometimes anti-Semitism may even sound like a farcical Saturday Night Live skit. Remember the congresswoman from Georgia who talked about Jewish space lasers that controlled the weather? Okay, well, how about some rain? But let's not be so quick to laugh, because it begins with the ridiculous, and it often ends with violence. A vibrant Jewish community and synagogue is the bulwark against anti-Semitism. So I'm asking you again today to donate to Temple Beth Ami, to make an affirmative statement that we believe in ourselves as Jewish members of this community. Multiple anonymous donors have committed to match every dollar donated to Temple Beth Ami's annual High Holiday Appeal. Basically, this means that your donation doubles. You can even text a donation at any time. We have a handout at the front desk with that information. Of course, checks, credit cards, they're still good. Those anonymous donors are also asking us, do we believe in ourselves? We are making important improvements at Temple Beth Ami too. The roofs have been repaired, the trees and plants trimmed, but we have more work to do, and hopefully that will happen over the next year. I believe that if the glass is half full, then you need to do something about filling up the rest of the glass. I also believe that Santa Clarita wants a vibrant Reformed synagogue. This is an inclusive community. It wants to keep improving, and we're needed. In addition to our present-day talents, we bring the perspective of more than 5,000 years of history. So we need to look to the future, which is now and next week and next month and next year, because it would be more than a tragedy if we ended up like the Jewish community of Las Vegas, New Mexico, and just faded away. Thank you.